budget is expected to be one of Malaysia's most defining financial roadmaps yet. Beyond government spending, tax reforms are at the heart of this year's debate. From the global minimum tax to digital service levies, from carbon pricing to incentives for businesses and households. How will these changes affect Malaysia's competitiveness and the everyday lives of citizens? Plus, why tax could shape the nation's future. This is Money Matters. Hello and good evening. You're tuned in to TV3, which you can also stream on Tonton. Welcome to the show. I'm Azaria Tagaya, and today we'll dive into the big issues shaping Malaysia's tax landscape ahead of the 2026 budget. From new and emerging taxes to the global trends impacting our economy. Now, joining us in this week's episode is the head of tax at KPMG, So Lian Seng. Hi there, Lian Seng. It's a pleasure to have you with us on the show.
Thank you, Azaria, and thank you for having me here.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Now, let's start with the bigger picture. As we head into the 2026 budget, what are some of the key challenges that we're currently facing right now?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And when we look at, I think, from Malaysia's perspective, heading to the upcoming budget 2026, I would say Malaysia is now in the delicate position how to balance the fiscal consolidation as well as the spending ambitions, right? But the good news, when we look at the past few years, the fiscal deficit has actually on the downtrend from 2022 of 5.5% to anticipated of 3.6% in 2026. The question here is, based on the 13th Malaysian plan, there is this very ambitious 89 billion that earmarked for project in terms of infrastructure, digitalization, and all. So this lies with the fundamental question: where will the source of fund coming in? Right?
Exactly.
More borrowings, new taxes, or improve the existing tax collection? So in my view, the government will continue with a mixed strategy. There may not be any new taxes, perhaps, but again, looking at how the current tax can be expanded. So if you look at, for example, that GST reintroduction may not be expected for this round, and we can see how the expanded SST that came in with all the expanded services, will this going to happen by expanding more type of sector into there? So of course it's a question mark. But of course another angle you look at it in terms of subsidy rationalization. Currently the blanket subsidy ration has been phased out and more of targeted. To me, I think that is on the right track in terms of that. If you want to promote more on the enhancement of the enforcement strategy with the e-invoicing and the tax identification number, that digitalization process perhaps could help and curb some of these leakages. So to me, key tax challenge for this coming budget, I suppose it's not just about the increase of revenue, but I think it's the way how should this revenue that increase be more equitable, more aligned to the long-term growth for this country. And that should be the tagline for the coming budget 2026.
All right. Now, picking up on something very interesting you mentioned just now on should we introduce new taxes? Should we improve on the existing taxes? I guess in this aspect, we want to get your personal opinion from your perspective. Do you think the government should be looking at introducing new taxes either now or maybe in the future? Or should the focus instead be on improving the existing tax collection and also especially on improving compliance?
Now, in my view, this is not the right time, to introduce new taxes. Now, when we look at it, the Rakyat, for example, currently, they are all grasping on the cost of living pressure, right? You look at businesses, in particular the SMEs, I look at it, they are adjusting the multiple reform that has been announced, invoicing, expanded SST, and when you talk about the global tax trend, the Pillar 2, and what's more, with the uncertainty of the geopolitics with the US tariff in terms of that. So I would like to see how the current compliance base being improved, and how can the government then strengthen, the existing tax collection. So talking about that, IRB or Hasil has been promoting a lot of digitalization. And if you were to pick, say, the e-invoicing and the tax identification number, for example, to me, that is a good initiative, how to bring more new taxpayer into the net, right? But because in the past, this could be something that have missed out, for example. Audit, for example, is something that Hasil can do better with this new technology, pulling all this data together, having a data analytic and analyzing which focus area should be covered. So to me, if you look at the current Malaysian position, our tax revenue stand at 12.6% of the GDP. So question here is still relatively low compared to our neighboring country. So again, instead of rushing into having a new tax to increase this tax revenue, why don't we look at the existing system that we have? How can we improve it? And how can we actually increase the base and make sure that we can protect the Rakyat, and in the longer term, that can actually give us maybe more on the sustainable position.
Indeed, that's fantastic, Dancing. Now, we also want to get your views on the carbon tax framework, because the government has indicated that there are plans to finalize this in 2026. But the real question, I guess, is Malaysia ready? But I would like for you to hold that thought for a bit, because it's time for us to go for a short breather. Don't go anywhere after this with the head of tax at KPMG, Solian Seng, on Money Matters. Thank you so much for staying with us on Money Matters. We are still with the head of tax at KPMG, Sol Yan Seng, talking about tax as we move into the 2026 budget. Now, Yan Seng, before the break, we had a little discussion about all the different possibilities that we could be facing in the near future. So one of those possibilities is the carbon tax framework. So the government has said that they might want to finalize this in the coming year in 2026. Do you think that Malaysia is ready to implement something like this?
Thank you, Azaria. Thank you. Yeah, in my view, the way how I see this plan of having it in 2026 is a bold step, actually. But again, it is also a necessary step if our goal remains the same, to have a net zero goal by 2050. Right? But the question is, the readiness of whether we should proceed in 2026 is not just the policy issue. I think it involves the whole ecosystem. Are we actually ready, with the whole ecosystem? Now, let's take a look. In my view, there could be three areas that is very important to take care of. Number one, do we actually have the measurement ready? Number two, what about verification? And the last one, even you have all these two ready, the monitoring process. Right? So the big question, is Malaysia ready with that? Of course, when you talk about measurement, I do know Malaysia may have compiled certain data pertaining to the greenhouse sectoral data. But I think many companies that involved in these high carbon emittents, like steel, energy, they still need a robust system at the facility level. So that we see they still need more time. Now, verification. Do we have a pool of accredited, bodies to do it? I may not know, but in order to have this qualified accredited pool, you need training, right? Then you need a clearer code of conduct, for example. And all this need time. When you talk about monitoring, usually we will talk about, do we actually have a platform which is very essential that we need it? Because with a proper digital platform, for example, where you need to do submission, this required data, are we able to retrieve appropriately? What about this data integrate with another data? So are we ready with the integration? And not forgetting the data privacy confidentiality. Again, all this, are we ready? Right? I may not have an answer for that, but I think if you want to safeguard our businesses to remain competitive, and this is not, I would say, a small project, what businesses or the government should consider phases by phases, implementation by phases. Because when you look at businesses, I think if you want to do it seriously, let's start with those companies with having carbon high emittance position first. Then gradually, you move on to other sector. That, I believe, will give more time to industry to adapt, and to learn something new, right? Of course, other than this phase implementation, important also, especially the SME, is good practice to set certain emission threshold. And this will allow certain transitional relief. Right? Because when you talk about SME, for that reason, new taxes, new policy, new requirement, new compliance. So all that will increase. Government also can consider if they want to proceed to implement with certain sector first, then the carbon tax that they collect, can we consider channel it to a certain fund to then support other sector by having grant, loan, or even co-funding, for them to get involved in those technology, right? Of course, the other point is when we talk about encouraging more to invest, tax deduction should come in. So why don't government consider expanding some of this tax deduction relief to cover some of these expenses that businesses need to incur, or at least can help them at least the initial cost funding perspective. Last but not least, businesses to be competitive, I believe we should always observe and align with our international measure, because that would then make Malaysia businesses align with international and continue to protect our businesses here. That would be my thought.
Okay, wonderful. Now, one more thing I'd like to get your opinion on is, do you think, is it possible that Malaysia might eventually re-implement the GST as part of perhaps a long-term tax reform?
This is a $1 million question, right? I remember this question has been asked to me on a yearly basis, GST. Well, in my opinion, I think, Malaysia may eventually have to come to, or revisiting the implementation of GST. Because when you talk about GST, this is usually part of the broader tax reform. It should not be viewed as isolated in that sense, So, of course, we know that government has actually expanded the SST for the last 1 year, extend to, sector in the past that may not have covered like healthcare, education. But SST, you still have this so-called, the term you use, single tier, where may be viewed as lack of transparency to a certain extent, and the cascading effect in terms of that. So when we talk about single stage tax, there will be lack of this input tax credit mechanism, right? So of course, if you talk to other stakeholders, like World Bank, for example, they will always advocate the return of GST in view of efficiency, and also stability in terms of your revenue stream and transparency, right? So of course, question would be the timing as well as the execution that are very critical. So if we were to look at the past implementation experience, the key point businesses faced was the refund. So if the government need to revisit again the GST, this important key of refund need to be addressed. Now, beside refund, we also experienced in the past on the inflationary pressure, because that itself will have impact on the rakyat. So, of course, as a measurement, if we really want to revisit, my view, a good start would be a low rate, and government must not ignore the exemption rate list, because that will help to take care of the rakyat. So, and with the current e-invoicing platform that has been in place, together with some of these digital compliance tools, I believe this would actually help to smoothen the reintroduction. So, so these are the important key points. At a certain point in time, Malaysia will have to revisit the coming back of this GST implementation.
Okay, so we might have to revisit, but it's important to have these things in place first before we actually look at doing that. All right, then, Seng, it's time for us to take another short break. So we'll be back after this on Money Matters, more with the head of tax at KPMG. Don't go anywhere. You're still with us on Money Matters, and we're speaking to So Lian Seng, the head of tax at KPMG. Now, Lian Seng, as we move into the final segment of Money Matters, we want to take a look at how the 2026 budget might impact the lives of individuals, because just now we also mentioned about companies and businesses. So with inflation and the cost of living concerns that have been really prominent in these past few months especially, do you see any room for adjustments in personal income tax brackets, or maybe some relief for households perhaps?
Yes, I mean, I do see there are rooms in terms of the what they call the adjustment in the personal income tax. I got to acknowledge that the inflation that has affected everyone, right? Prices for food, housing, and healthcare, all that has increased. You know?
Yeah.
Of course, if this area government can consider reducing some of the certain bracket, maybe the lower part of the M40, that would be great. That would be great. But looking at the current situation, my thought is perhaps instead of considering a general blanket for the relief, government may consider a targeted approach. Question here would be, who deserves more in terms of this? Now, I give example. Perhaps you will have a group of individuals like OKU, single parents, or for that matter, matters that you have elderly care in your family members that you require. Now, this will have additional costs for all of them to manage the household. So, this budget, of course, with the Madani, Prihatin kind of framework, then it's something that the government can consider having some adjustment of the relief.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So that would be great, because if that, then way forward, I always believe it should not be a blanket kind of changes, more targeted and easy to manage the future fiscal consolidation as well.
I agree. So more targeted, we have to decide who actually receives it, and also the implementation, how they actually receive that.
That's right.
All right, that's wonderful. Fantastic. Now, Lian Seng, as we have just a few more minutes left on the show, perhaps very quickly before we head into the 2026 budget, which is less than a week away, if you could highlight one or two tax reforms that should be the government's top priority, what would they be and why?
Thank you for that question. I think, to me, at the moment, I only have one that I really hope that the government will look into this particular reform, which is a stamp duty. Right? So if you look at the Stamp Act 1949, it has never been reviewed. I was not even born yet. Right? So when you look at it, the Stamp Act currently is quite complicated, and to businesses, it can be quite burdensome, you know, because when you look at the first schedule, how do you navigate some of those clauses? It can be quite confusing as well. Now, what's more, when it comes to 2026, the intention of implementing the self-assessment will take place. So this is the part where, from business perspective, it will be good to have a clearer guideline, right? Without the guideline, businesses may be wondering, how do I then interpret certain law, right? So that's one. Maybe it's also timely to also relook at some of these transactions, example, employment contract or professional service agreement contract. And if you were to weigh the cost of implementation versus the revenue that to be derived from, does it equate? If it is not, then perhaps the strategy here is to relook at what would be the right scope that the government should target. And once you simplify it by the relevant category and having the right tax rate, perhaps the government will even get more. But that actually facilitates the whole implementation of it. So, of course, the worst part is without this clearer guideline that issued, the most worrisome part is taxpayer got to deal with authority if they carry out an audit and the issue involved 4-5 years ago where it was still under official assessment system, right? And any discrepancy, so-called, because of different interpretation and that result in penalties, then taxpayer will have to pay for it. Yeah, so I think what could be done, my point of view in this reform, let's limit to the reasonable numbers of the category under the Schedule 1 so that people are clear, you can actually move forward, and most taxpayer wants to pay the right amount of tax.
Yes, definitely. And that is a good perspective heading into the 2026 budget.
Yeah.
A lot of sound viewpoints that you've raised today, and I guess we'll see on Friday if anything that we've discussed today is actually touched in the budget and what can we do moving forward.
Yes.
Well, it's been amazing speaking to you, Lian Singh. Thank you so much for making time for us on Money Matters.
Thank you, Azaria. Thank you, Mimi. Thank you.
So that was Lian Singh, the KPMG Head of Tax. Thank you so much to our guests once again, and thank you to you as well for being with us for the past 30 minutes on Money Matters. Now, if you missed any part of today's show, you can always catch it up on Tuntun, and I'm Azara Tagaya. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.